to the Putting Your Business on the Map podcast. This is the podcast for land surveyors that own or want to own a small business. My name is Landon Blake. I am your podcast host. Let's dive right into today's episode. The title of today's episode is How to Crush Blood-Sucking Parasites as part of your business development. This is another installment in our series on finding good clients. I'm working on my word whiskers. Bear with me, please. So is my favorite word in the universe. I also say like, now. I'm working on those. Be patient with me, please. I want to take a couple minutes here before we dive into the topic and talk to my listeners. I've got a Patreon page up. It's called On Point Workshops. If you just run a search for that on Patreon, you'll find me. And I give people the opportunity there to support the podcast. It's $10 a month. That's where I have it set. And you get our PYBO team extras. And you get our bonus episodes, which I'm doing more of now. And I'm getting ready to roll out a newsletter, so I'm excited about that. And just based on some rough counts, I think I have over 100 people that regularly listen to the podcast, which is pretty... it doesn't sound impressive, but it's impressive to me. I didn't think I'd ever get that many. So people have responded well to the podcast. I think this is episode number 40. So I've got over 100 people. I don't know, it might be 150 people. It's hard to get an exact count because you can listen on YouTube or Spotify or Buzzsprout or Amazon Music. So it's a little hard to get an exact count, but I think I have around between 100 and 150 people. I have less than a half a dozen people that are supporting at $10 a month. So I'd like to just ask for your guys' support. I've been doing this almost a year now, not quite, and it's a lot of work. So I'm hoping I can get a few more people to sign up for $10 a month. Yes, Kyle, I'm talking to you, buddy. So, I don't know, guys, $10 a month. Like, that's the cost of a cheeseburger and fries. Like, can you pop me a cheeseburger and fries once a month? I'm going to keep doing the podcast because I think there's a lot of benefits for me. But I would like to know that you guys value it at least $10 a month. So this is my NPR fundraising pitch. NPR-like fundraising pitch. Help me out. Become a supporter on Patreon. I'm going to start doing every third or every other episode as a bonus episode. I'm hoping to encourage people to support us on Patreon that way. I'm also going to make the bonus episodes available. If you just want to purchase them now, Patreon supports that, so you can get on there. I'm going to charge $10, and you can listen to a bonus episode if you want to catch that. So if you missed our last episode, it was a bonus episode about the connection between investment, growth, and profit. So check that out. If you subscribe, you can get all the bonus episodes. If you want to pay $10 for that, that's available now on the Patreon page. I'm not trying to pay for my time, guys. I'm just trying to cover web hosting costs and the help I get from Carly and the costs I have for the software that I use to edit the audio and the video and the streaming costs that I have. So hook me up with a cheeseburger and fries. Let's dive into the episode. I'm going to talk about a conversation I had with a civil engineer. His name was Chad. He was a good guy, I think. I didn't know him super well, but he struck me as a good guy. And I talked to Chad. That's a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago. So I was in my mid-30s, maybe. And Chad ran his own small civil engineering consulting company, and I volunteered with Chad on a nonprofit board I got roped into. It was a good experience. And so Chad was another board member. And so Chad and I were talking one time at a board event. I think it was at the dinner after a board meeting. And I don't know why I asked him, but I did. I asked him, I said, hey, if you were going to give one piece of advice to a young man like me, about running your own small consulting business, what would it be? And I don't think I had any plans at the time yet to start RH, but I had thought about it, people had encouraged me to do it. So I asked Chad that question. That was 10 years ago. I still remember what he told me. He said, basically, don't work for bad clients. He said, if I could go back in time and tell myself one thing, if I could teach myself one lesson early on, it would be not to do work for bad clients. I remember when I heard that at the time thinking, well, that's kind of weird advice. That's it wasn't what I expected. I thought he was going to have some deep insight or fundamental truth for me, but that was it. One sentence: don't work for bad clients. And I didn't really think about it. I didn't really give it much thought. I don't remember, but I may have said in my mind, well, you got to take whatever work you can get when you're starting a business. I may have said that. I can't remember. Not to Chad, but in my mind when I heard his answer to my question. So now, of course, I've been running RH for 5 years, and I realize, man, that was super valuable advice he gave me. That one sentence, if I'd have listened, could have saved me a lot of money. Maybe $100,000, maybe more than $100,000, maybe $150,000 or $250,000. That was really valuable advice. And I look back on it now and I realize Chad had learned some of the lessons the hard way that I'm learning. Don't work for bad clients. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about don't work for bad clients. And what we're going to try and do is help you figure out how to not get a bad client in the first place. And some of that has to do with the way you filter your sales funnel. And so that's why I titled the episode, How to Crush Blood-Sucking Parasites as Part of Your Business Development. You want to screen those folks out in your business development. You don't want to let them get down to the proposal and contract phase. So we're going to offer some tips on how you can do that. Let me give you an overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you some definitions. What we're not talking about today is the parasites you already have as clients. I have some different episodes that touch on that. So I'm not going to tell you how to get rid of a parasite if you already have them as a client. This is about how to avoid parasites. And we're not going to talk about how you find clients that aren't parasites. See our other episodes in this set on finding good clients for more information about that. Why is this important? This idea of crushing these blood-sucking parasites as part of your business development. It's important for 3 reasons. They have a huge impact on your profitability. You do not want to get those people under contract because they are going to cost you money. Blood-sucking parasites increase your liability. The clients that complain about your bills and pay late are also the first clients that will typically sue you. And there are tremendous opportunity costs to dealing with blood-sucking parasites. So the time you waste on blood-sucking parasites could be spent on finding and serving your good clients. So there's a tremendous opportunity cost there. That's why this is important. That's why I wanted to talk about it. We will discuss half a dozen or so signs that you might be dealing with a blood-sucking parasite, and you can usually identify that, in the early stages of business development when you're doing needs discovery and developing a project approach or a scope. We'll talk about how do you install this blood-sucking parasite filter in your sales funnel. Right? You want the good clients to pass through the filter, but you want to stop the blood-sucking parasites. How do you do that? How do you design that filter? Talk about that for a few minutes, and then I'm going to give you a handful of best practices related to this idea of crushing blood-sucking parasites that you can start implementing today in your small business. It is a value-packed episode, I hope. I hope it's a value-packed episode. What are our definitions? I've got 4 of them. We're going to define marketing, business development, potential client, and parasite. You guys have heard me talk about these first 2 before. Marketing, that's what you do to generate leads. It's the kind of things you do to make people aware of the problem you solve and how you solve it. And it's where you help people understand what your brand represents. Business development is when you have a lead, hopefully a hot lead or a warm lead, and you convert that lead into a paying client. Marketing, more about awareness and education. Business development, taking a lead, turning it into a paying client. What is a potential client? That's somebody that's not a client yet, but could be a client. they've engaged with you at some level in the sales funnel. There's some kind of lead, like warm or hot lead, potentially. So they saw your website or a post on LinkedIn, or they got referred by another client of yours and they're reaching out. That's a potential client. What's a parasite? A parasite is somebody that, or something, could be an animal, either a person or an animal that essentially lives off a host, person or animal, without providing any benefit to the host. So it's not a symbiotic relationship. So you could say my wife and I, we have a symbiotic relationship, right? We have a close partnership, but we both benefit from that relationship. My nieces, I have lots of nieces because I married into a Hispanic family. Most of my nieces have very poor choice in boyfriends. Those are parasitic relationships. So a lot of those young men, I don't know if you should call them men. A lot of those boys only take, they don't give in the relationship. That's a parasitic relationship. You do not want to be in a parasitic relationship with the client, right? The client needs to benefit you just like you benefit the client, or at least that's the goal. There's our definitions. We know what we're talking about now. What are some signs as you engage in the business development process that you might be dealing with a blood-sucking parasite? I have 6 things we're going to talk about. These are things that are going to become evident to you, as you develop that lead, right? So somebody makes initial contact, reaches out to you, and you start to ask them questions as part of the needs discovery. You start to discuss, ballpark pricing. You talk about what isn't included in your typical scope. All those things that you do as part of the business development process. These are 6 things you want to look for. Number 1, continued request for help or advice before a contract is in place. I got a lady we worked with when I was early. She was maybe our 4th client or 5th client. I did a boundary survey for her. She was in a boundary dispute with the neighbor. And this lady I worked for her 4 or 5 years ago. She still contacts me 3 times a year, asking questions and wanting me to look at documents. She basically lost her case. And she just can't let it go. And I keep telling her, hey, I'm not under contract with you anymore. I can't give you advice. You lost your case. If you want me to pursue these other leads, I can do that, but I need a new contract and you got to pay a deposit and I don't think it's worth your time. She will not stop. So there's that continued request for help or advice. Right? And in the business development phase, you get people that will want to ask you a ton of questions before they've got you under contract. That is a sign, potentially, it's a sign of a potential parasite. They're going to pump as much free advice as they can get from you, and before they have to give you any money. And a lot of those people never intend on giving you any money. I've learned that the hard way. It's happened to me over and over again. So that's the first sign. You tell them, hey, I need to get you under contract, but they keep asking for advice or asking you questions, wanting you to look at stuff. Major red flag, do not go to a site. Do not go to a site. Do not do a site walk. I don't do site walks anymore until somebody's paid a deposit. I just don't. I don't know how many site walks I did the first couple of years we were in business, and I don't think any of those potential clients ended up getting me under contract, and I wasted a bunch of time and money doing site walks. I don't do that. Even had a potential client one time. They wanted me, I farted around with them for 2 months, crafting this project approach for a unique project with a lot of challenges. It was in Los Angeles. It was downtown LA. And they farted around. They wouldn't get me under contract, and they were nitpicking my price. And then they asked me to go to drive to LA to walk the site with them. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. And they never got us under contract. So in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't drive to LA for the weekend. Now, what I told them was, look, if you want to give me $3,500, I'll drive to LA for the weekend to do a site walk and look at the site and help you tailor the scope. But I'm not doing it for free. Of course, they didn't want to pay me to do that. Sign number 1. Continue requests for help or advice before contract is in place. Sign number 2. They're just looking for a coupon deal. And you can tell when you got people that are looking for a coupon deal, right? Is there anything you can do? Can you sharpen your pencil? The guy down the street was 80% less than you, but I really would like you to do the work. That kind of mumbo jumbo. That's a sign that you potentially have a parasite on the other end of the line. Now, sometimes you just get people that like to haggle. My wife is like that. She's Hispanic. I love her. She's Hispanic. She likes a coupon deal. She likes to haggle. But as a general rule, that's a bad sign. Right? And I tell people, the first price I gave you was a fair price. And I don't gouge my clients. I can't do the work for you for half the price I originally told you, because the price I gave you originally was fair. And if I do it for half, I'm going to lose money. Watch out for number 2, desire for coupon deals. Number 3, this is the grandma got hit by a bus story. So this is the client that comes to you. They've got some sad story, right? I inherited this property from my grandma, and the neighbor's being so mean to me, or the city won't answer my phone calls, and I just don't understand. Reminds me of the line that Princess Leia gave in New Hope, this first Star Wars movie, where she says, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. So if you have an Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope story, be afraid. That is potentially sign of a blood-sucking parasite. We'll talk a little bit more about charity work at the end of the episode. I do charity work, but I don't do charity work for people that own land or want to do real estate development. Number 5 is an unwillingness to provide what you need to do an accurate fee estimate or scope. I get this a lot with Alta surveys. Somebody calls up, they're like, I need an Alta survey. I'm like, I need a table A. I need the table A items required by the lender, and I need the title report, and 85% of the time they don't have a title report or the table A items. Their willingness to provide you what you need to develop an appropriate scope and an accurate fee estimate is an indication of what kind of client they're going to be. If they can't put in a little bit of effort to get you what you need that they have access to, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. Number 5. If you feel like you got somebody that's a do-it-yourself advocate, and I get this a lot with people, amateur land developers. I tell people, you don't want to do land development as an amateur in California. It's too difficult, and people don't listen. So get amateur land developers. They're always trying to DIY, do it themselves. I had a lady that we ended up with as a client like this 2 or 3 years ago. And I assumed she was fairly sophisticated because she was a real estate agent. That was a mistake. And I kept telling her, look, we did a bunch of extra work for her that we didn't get paid for because I was still learning how to run a business. But at some point I told her, hey, I've done too much for you that I haven't been paid for. I can help you run this little development project, but I need to be paid for my time. And here's what it might cost. Of course, she didn't like to hear that. But she would continue to add, even after I told her I need to be paid for this, they would continue to ask me questions, her and her partner. So that gets back to number 1, right? Continue request for help. And I finally told her, I can't answer these questions anymore unless you authorize me to do project management and agree to pay for it. She says, well, the people at the county don't want to answer my questions. I know they don't want to answer your questions because they don't want to deal with an amateur. Well, they should. That's their job. I'm like, you're right. They should. They're public servants. But that doesn't mean they're going to. You want to fix that problem? Pay me. When I go down there, they'll talk to me because they know I'm not going to waste their time. Yeah, what do you do with people like that? So I'm not in business to help DIY, advocates. If you think you can watch YouTube and do your own land development project, knock yourself out. I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Yeah, I tell people you wouldn't do DIY hip surgery. Why do you think you can do DIY land development? I just don't understand. Hey, you want to DIY your deck around your pool? Knock yourself out. Don't DIY your land development project. All right, just to review the 5 signs that you might have a blood-sucking parasite while you're doing your business development. Continued requests for help or advice before a contract is in place. They're looking for a coupon deal. They got my grandma was hit by a bus story. They're unwilling to provide you the bare essentials you need to give them an accurate fee estimate and scope. and you get the feeling these people want to DIY, do it themselves. Those are all, I don't know if they're red flags. They're red flags or yellow flags maybe. The more you have, the more careful you need to be. All right, speaking of being careful, be careful before you go spend $100,000 on expensive GIS software that you don't need. So if you're running a civil engineering company or a land surveying company and you're thinking about dipping your toe in GIS, you don't got to go spend $100,000. You don't need an ArcGIS server in your basement. Go check out QGIS, Quantum GIS, open source desktop GIS, full featured program, free to download, runs on the desktop, scriptable in Python. Really cool program. We use it here every day at Redefined Horizons. It's a great way to get started with GIS. If you download QGIS and you think this is cool, I'm super stoked that Landon turned me on to this, and you want a little help, professional help, implementing GIS at your organization with QGIS, reach out to us. We can prepare a proposal to do that. I guarantee it won't be $100,000. So for a few $1,000s, we could potentially get you rolling with QGIS. Check that out. You've heard me say on the podcast before, if you're using something like Google Earth to manage your survey data, QGIS is a great stepping stone. Right? It's a major step up from Google Earth, even though Google Earth is a really cool program. Next section of our episode, we're going to talk about how do you install a filter into your sales funnel to stop these parasites. So, if you think your sales funnel like a funnel you'd use to put oil in your car, or a funnel you'd use like when you're baking or whatever, or cooking, how do we get a filter in there? It's like when when my Hispanic wife is pouring canola oil back in the jar and she wants to screen out the little pieces of fried food. That's what we want to do. We want to have a filter in our sales funnel. So you want to build a filter. Now you got to be careful. Leads are the lifeblood of your business. You want those leads. Those are important. That's the whole point of marketing, right? Is to generate leads. So you don't want to eliminate all your leads, but you don't want to let the blood-sucking parasites in with your good leads, with your hot leads. Right? So you need to have an appropriately designed filter. And your filter has multiple elements, potentially. And so you got to be very conscious about how you design the filter. So I'm going to tell you how we create our blood-sucking parasite filter for our sales funnel at RH. And this doesn't mean that you have to do it exactly the way that we do it, but I'm going to give you a half a dozen or so elements of our blood-sucking parasite filter. Number one, we ask for money early in the process. Especially with smaller, unsophisticated clients, I just tell them, I can't give you a full, detailed proposal with a rock-solid, accurate cost estimate if you're doing a 3-lot parcel map, unless you give me some money for an initial consultation fee. We usually tell people that's between $1,800 and $3,200. So it's not a ton of money, but it's not $300. And what I tell them is, for that money, we'll have an hour conversation with you, talk about all your goals, what you're trying to accomplish, what your risk tolerance is, the conversations you've already had with the planning department and the engineer and the architect. We'll go look at the local land use regulations. We'll do some boundary research. We'll figure out what this costs. Not just our cost, but what you might pay the title company, what the city fees or county fees are going to be. And we'll try and get you a good idea of what it might cost overall to do your project. We charge money for that. I can't do that for everybody that calls. I would go bankrupt. That eliminates 90%, maybe 95% of the tire kickers. I ask for $1,500 or $1,800 or $2,200. Those people just stop. They just stop calling. They just go away. My business partner Brian and I have decided that may be one of the most smartest things we've ever done in our 5 years in business, is just ask people for a little bit of money up front. So it's a great part of the filter. We also talk about project costs as soon as we can. So fairly early on, usually in the first or second exchange with the potential client, I'm talking about hey, here's what I think, you're going to need to spend. Not just for us, but all together to reach your goal. I think your total bill is going to be X. And, we're usually rounding to the nearest $5,000 or $10,000. I know surveyors that are afraid to to tell their clients that because they don't want to lose the potential work. Okay, first of all, that's a little bit dishonest, and it's not being a good consultant. You just got to tell people, oh, you want to get in a war with your neighbor over your property line? I plan on spending $50,000 in survey fees and legal fees. They need to hear that. Why monkey around with people that don't have that money? I do the same thing when people call, and they got a land development project. I'm like, you need, whatever, $80,000. And you want to develop a little commercial lot in Oakdale, you need a grading plan and a conditional use permit and a building permit. Yeah, plan on $100,000. That's what it's going to cost. If you don't have that money, I don't want to work for you because I end up not having my bills paid, or I end up with my grandma got hit by a bus story. Number 3, third part of our filter at RH, we get a commitment from the client before we provide specific advice. I've talked about this before on the podcast. I don't mind. I'll call people on the way home on my commute. It's usually the way home because I get up pretty early, but I'll call people on my way home and have a conversation with them about why they think they need a survey. But I don't talk about specifics until I'm under contract. Now, part of the reason I do that is because I'm trying to eliminate blood-sucking parasites. The other reason I tell people is, there's liability issues for me. Like, if I'm going to give you specific advice that you might act upon, I need to have you under contract for all kinds of different reasons. So they need to pay us something and have a signed contract before we provide specific advice. That's one thing I've learned from the land attorneys I work with. Attorneys are really good at that. You don't get specific advice from a land attorney until you have what they call a legal retention agreement. Number 4, fourth part of the filter. We always try and assess as early as we can the level of urgency the client has and their ability to pay. If they're going to be a good client, they need both of those things. They need a sense of urgency and they need the ability to pay. I talked to a lady 2-3 weeks ago, super nice lady. She spoke Spanish. Her English wasn't very good, so I spent a little more time with her than I would have normally. She's trying to, put a house on a vacant lot in Stockton. She doesn't care if it's done next week or 4 months from now, and she doesn't have the money to pay the bill. That's not a good client. I'm not going to give her a lot of help. I told her, hey, here's what I think this is going to cost you. I can have it done in 2 weeks. She's like, oh, me amigo, that's way more money than I have. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. So assess the level of urgency and the ability to pay. Number 5. You can let people know, we talked about it briefly, but I just let them know, hey, there's liability to giving you free consulting advice. And I also tell them, I'm just honest with people. I'm like, hey, I wish I had the time to, spend 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours with everybody that called, looking at their land records and talking to their county surveyor and calling the planning department and finding out what their conditional use permit process is like or what we got to do for a lot line adjustment. I don't have time. I will go out of business. I can't do it. And I just tell the people the truth. I can't do it for liability reasons. I can't do it because it will bankrupt me. And 9 times out of 10, when I have that conversation with a potential client, they understand. And they're respectful. Almost always. Like, you know what? I understand why you can't do this with everybody that calls. Thank you for letting me know. Number 6, last one here. Last part of the RH filter for blood-sucking parasites. We think about how many questions are we going to answer for free. There's a limit. I don't know. I'll answer a half a dozen questions for a client on a commute home or in an email. Yeah, you start pushing 10 questions. I'm going to tell you I need to get you under contract. Now look, your limit might be different than mine. Maybe your limit's 15 questions. Or maybe it's 2 questions. Maybe it changes depending on how busy you are. But have in the back of your mind, like, where is that line? I know where that line's at for me. And at some point I start thinking to myself, this person's asking me a lot of questions. They probably just need to get me under contract. Because I'm always looking I'm always looking for that potential blood-sucking parasite, right? I don't want to let them through my filter. I mentioned this before. I eliminate 90% of potential clients that come into our sales funnel. It's not they eliminate us, we eliminate them. I think it's higher than 90%. It might be 95%. Maybe it's 90% because we've gotten a little better with our marketing message. Part of being a good marketer is generating the right kind of leads. So maybe it is 90%. In the beginning, it was probably 95%. If you're going to run a top-notch, high-quality firm with reasonably healthy profit margins, I'm going to tell you, I think you need to be eliminating 80% of your leads with your filter. Because 80% of your potential market is blood-sucking parasites. People that want something for nothing. The internet has taught people the last 20 years that everything of value should be free. And so we fight that. I've talked about that before. I think the internet is a two-edged sword. All right, I'm going to take a quick bathroom break. When I come back, we're going to get into the last section. We're going to talk about some best practices that we have to avoid blood-sucking parasites, and then we'll wrap this up. I'm back. What are these best practices? I got four best practices we can talk about. Here's the first one. I learned this the hard way. Don't give away the recipe. One of the things that happened to me the first couple of years we were in business is I'd engage in the needs discovery process. I'd do research. I'd develop a scope tailored to the client's needs and their risk tolerance. And then the clients would take my scope and my research and they would go see if the guy down the street would do it for $500 cheaper. And he usually would because, of course, I'd already spent the money on the research and the needs discovery. And so I learned not to do that. I learned not to give away the recipe. Now, I do engage in a little bit of needs discovery still if I think I've got a serious client, potential client. But as a general rule, I don't send people a fully fleshed out formal scope or a detailed fee estimate until I know they're ready to sign a contract. And there may be a few exceptions to that, but I just don't go around anymore handing out, detailed scopes tailored to a client's specific needs. Now, and I've talked about this in other episodes. What I will do is give a client a brief email proposal with some ballpark costs. And those are usually less than, a half a page. But I don't, at some point, if I've got a client that wants to engage in a lengthy needs discovery process and get a tailored scope, I tell them you need to pay me for that. So don't give away the recipe. Because 80% of the people you're dealing with will take your recipe and go see if somebody else will use your recipe to give them what they need for, 3% less than your fee. And they will because they're using your recipe so they can afford to not charge the 3%. So don't give away the recipe, right? At some point you need to get paid for a serious needs assessment. You need to get paid to do your initial research. And you need to get paid to develop a detailed scope and a project approach. Now look, if you're doing fence surveys, this might not apply to you. But we don't do fence surveys here. We try and tackle projects that are relatively complicated. And I can't spend a bunch of time doing needs discovery and research. That's even sometimes with existing clients. Now, I'm more willing to do that with existing clients that I have a track record with. I'll give you an example. We're working for a client right now. It's a local government. We've been working with them for a couple of years. And they had a big project they wanted me to price. And so we gave them, we did, and we'd done this kind of work for them before. So we took a look. We spent a few hours and I kicked over some ballpark numbers to them. I said, hey, we think this is about what it might cost. And they're like, well, that's 30% more than we thought. Do you think you can, dial this down for us? And I said, tell you what, if you want to cut me loose on a $15,000 contract, we'll go do a bunch of records research. We'll go into the field, check out the terrain, see what kind of monuments we might have on the ground. And then, I probably can dial this down 30%. And they're like, well, we don't want to pay to do that. I'm like, well, then I have to make some assumptions about the conditions that are on the ground, and I got to build in a little buffer. I was like, and that's the price difference. That's the 30%. Like, you can pay me to spend, I don't know, it took us a week. You can pay me and another one of my people to spend a week going through records research and assessing road access and terrain and scouting out monument locations. And we can dial this number in and the price will undoubtedly come down. Or you can pay the buffer. And I'll bill you, as we get the work completed. And they're like, you know what? We'll just pay you the 30%. I said, okay. I didn't care. Like, we can do one or the other. What I'm not going to do is give you a bare bones price that doesn't have any buffer in it for the unknowns if you're not willing to pay me to go figure out the unknowns. Either you pay for some uncertainty as the work gets completed, or you pay for some upfront work to remove the uncertainty, and then you get a lower price. But it's one or the other. Right, here's the next thing. Best practice. Have rules for when you do work for friends and family. I'm not going to tell you what your rules need to be, but have them and write them down. Here's the rule. Here's the rules we follow at RH. If you are an employee or a family member of an employee and you need a boundary survey or boundary topo, we just go do it for you. I'll just do it. I'll just do you a favor. I don't want to fight with friends and family about how much it costs. So we just do it. But I tell the person, like, you owe me a favor. They say, oh, well, we don't want to owe you a favor. I'm like, well, if you want me to do the survey, then you're going to owe me a favor. And they always say the same thing. Well, just tell me what I need to pay for it. And then I tell them, all right, well, if we were to do it and charge it, I would charge X. And they're like, oh my God, X is five times what I thought it would be. And I was like, I know. I was like, that's why I want to just do it for you as a favor. And they're like, well, I don't want to owe you a favor. I'm like, tell you what, call, and I got a couple guys that run one-man shops. I'm like, call Mike or call Tom and pay them to do it. And they're like, well, we want you to do it though. I'm like, yeah, I know, but see, this isn't going to work. Either I do it for free and you owe me a favor that's worth roughly X. And I probably won't ever call that favor in, but let's just be clear that I'm doing you a favor. Or go pay somebody else to do it. Because what you really want is to pay me a coupon price and not owe me a favor. And that doesn't, we got to be clear. Either I'm doing you a favor because you're a friend or a family member, or you can go pay somebody else to do the work for you. And I tell them, if you're going to pay, don't pay me because your project's too small. Go hire a guy that's got a one-man shop. He'll charge you less money, and then I don't have to fight with you over what it's worth. We do not do paid surveys for friends and family here. We don't. We either do it for free or we refer people. And I've learned that lesson the hard way. Best practice number 3. Have a written policy about charity work. I tell people, RH does charity work. We've done charity work for the local sportsman's club. We've done charity work for some nonprofit organizations. If Habitat for Humanity called me tomorrow, or the local homeless shelter called me tomorrow, or the Boy Scouts called me tomorrow and needed a boundary survey, we wouldn't charge them. We would just take care of it. I think that's an important part of being a local business owner, small business owner in a small community. So we do charity work. But what I tell people is I don't do charity work for rich folks. If you own 2,000 acres of almonds in the Central Valley, I don't owe you charity work. If you own a 5-bedroom, $1.5 million custom ranch home, I don't owe you charity work. Because people call up and they're like, oh, can't you just help me out? It's the my grandma got hit by a bus story. Oh, can't you just help me out? Don't you guys, I'm a good person. Like, yeah, okay, that's great. I have a written policy for who who qualifies for charity work from RH. You don't fit that profile. I'm sorry. If you are not Habitat for Humanity or the Boy Scouts or, my local clinic that provides free healthcare to low-income residents, I'm not giving you charity. Have a written policy about who you do charity work for, and then stick to it. Don't make exceptions. Best practice number 4. Find cost-effective and scalable ways to demonstrate expertise and provide value. Here's why that's important. Some people are going to hear this episode and they're going to say, well, Landon doesn't understand. I've got to be able to prove to potential clients that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm an expert. And that's true. I think that is true. You do need to do that as a consultant, as a professional land surveyor. You don't do that by giving away your expertise to blood-sucking parasites, though. What's the right way to establish your expertise and authority? Content marketing, education. You can refer people to other professionals. You can point people to online resources. I've talked about this before. We've got a great online presence. We've got a ton of content on YouTube. I do this podcast. When people call me and say, well, how do I know you're the guy that can solve my problem? I'm like, check out our YouTube channel. I send people to our YouTube channel probably, I don't know, a handful of times a month. I get somebody call, they got a question. I'm like, you know what? I can't give you specific advice until we're under contract. You might not need a surveyor. Go check out this video on our YouTube channel or check out this playlist on our YouTube channel. Answer a bunch of your questions. See, what's nice about that is that's scalable because I don't have to respend that time with every person that calls here with a question about how land subdivisions work in California. We have a whole playlist on land subdivisions in California. I just send people to the playlist. That's scalable. It's a scalable way to demonstrate expertise and value. And I tell people, hey, you get the first phone call from me on my commute. Like if you will take a phone call at 6:30 in the morning or 5:30 in the evening, yeah, I'll spend 15 or 20 minutes with you on the phone talking about your situation. Because that's cost effective for me. Let me run through those best practices again because I went pretty quick. Don't give away the recipe. Have rules for when you do work for friends and family. Have a written policy about who qualifies for charity work. Find cost-effective and scalable ways to demonstrate your expertise and to provide value. Do not give away specific expert advice to blood-sucking parasites to prove value. That is a tactic that is going to fail and cost your business a lot of money. Let's wrap this thing up. We're almost at 45 minutes. Remember Chad and what he told me? Fantastic advice I got 10 years ago. I wish I would have listened to him. It might have saved me $250,000. You have to learn how to say no to potential clients. I have so many friends in the surveying profession that just can't say no to bad work from crappy clients. And they get on the phone with me and they cry about what a tough situation they're in. And I'm like, I don't feel sorry for you. I got a friend, he called me a few months ago. I love him. He called me, he's like, I'm doing this survey and the guy's not paying my bill. And yeah, I know better because I did some work for him 4 months ago and he didn't pay my bill, my last bill. I'm like, you're a knucklehead. I feel no sympathy for you. Learn to say no. It's the most important thing you can say as a business owner. No. No, you're not a good fit. No, you don't have a sense of urgency. No, I don't think you have the ability to pay the bill that this is going to cost to actually get this done. Like, no, I am not giving you any more free advice. Now, I'm going to warn you, when you do that, when you say no, people are not going to know how to react. They are going to assume you will do anything to get their money. I run into this all the time, especially with civil engineers. I go, oh, well, I got this project. I know, but it's either it's not a good fit or you don't sound like a good client or I can't make money at it. Well, I know, but I got this project. Don't you want it? No, I know. I don't want it if I'm going to lose money and you're going to be a headache. No. They just don't understand. They're like, yeah, but I got a project. I had a giant engineering company call here. We'd done a little bit of work for them. They wanted me to take this little $8,000 prevailing wage survey in some town that was 4 or 5 hours from here. And they had horrible payment terms and really bad indemnification language in their contract. And I told them, like, I'm sorry, I'm not taking this job. I'm not taking this survey. And they're like, yeah, but we're going to give it to you. I said, I know, but I don't want it. They're like, yeah, did you, but you don't understand. We're going to give it to you. Oh, great. You're not getting 17 other quotes? I don't care. I still don't want the project. Well, why not? Because it's only $8,000 and it's prevailing wage and it takes you guys 8 months to pay me. And you're a pain in the butt. Yeah, I know, but we're just going to give it to you. Like, at that point, I'm beating my head on the concrete sidewalk outside of my office, right? That engineer, they were so in shock that they had their vice president call me. They have more than one. One of their vice presidents called me. She's like, it's Sharon. I'm the vice president from firm XYZ. I'm like, hi, Sharon, what can I do for you? Well, I just wanted to call you because, my team is confused. We're going to give you this project. I'm like, I know, Sharon. I don't want your project. She's like, I know, but I'm the vice president. I mean, thanks, Sharon. Hey, that's great. Nice to meet you. Happy you're the vice president. That doesn't change the economics of this project for me. Like, they thought I was going to be all impressed. The vice president got on the phone with me. Yeah, no, I'm not impressed. I still lose money. So the reason I tell you that story is people aren't going to know how to react. You're going to say no. I don't need your project. And they're going to look at you like you just sprouted horns and a forked tail. So be prepared for that. Don't deal with parasites. They bleed your business dry. And they won't think twice about it. They will bleed you dry in a heartbeat and not feel any remorse. And that is a large portion of the potential client base. 75%, 80%. It's a big percentage. Far more than the majority. Let your competition work for those people. You don't want to work for them. All right, that was depressing. Next episode, we'll try and be a little more positive and talk about understanding the business of Alta surveys. I think that one's going to be a regular episode. Let's see. I can't remember. We just did a bonus episode. This is going to be a regular episode. So yeah, the one on Alta surveys will be a regular episode. And then the next one, 42, we're going to talk about you need to do more than buy a tool to offer a professional service. That will be a bonus episode. So I look forward to recording those. I've already started working on them. I've already started brainstorming and outlining those. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, cheapos, pop the $10 on Patreon. Support your buddy. If you enjoy the podcast, and I would seriously hope it's $120 for a year. I would hope over the last year, those of you that have regularly listened have gotten $120 of business value out of the podcast, right? Hey, fist bump me, hook me up there. All right, appreciate it. Thanks. As we close out the episode, we just want to give you guys a few reminders. First, we want to let you know where you can find the podcast episodes. The podcast home on the web is at my personal website, landonblake.com. If you head there and look under the Learn menu, you'll find a link for the podcast. That homepage for the podcast has all of the episodes. You can download those in MP3 format if you'd like, or read the show notes. You can also find the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and Amazon Music. So if those are your preferred, one of those is your preferred distribution channel, you can find the podcast there. We also want to let you guys know if you'd like to sponsor the podcast, you can reach out to me, sunburn.surveyor@gmail.com. You can also send me questions, comments, thank yous, topic suggestions for the podcast. I regularly get that kind of feedback from listeners, and I dig it. I appreciate hearing from you guys, so I encourage you to do that. We also have a Patreon page. If you cruise over to Patreon, you can search for On Point Workshops, and you will find the podcast there. You can, for a small monthly donation, I believe right now it's $10 a month, you can support the podcast and get access to what we call PYB OTM Extras. So those are extra videos, short audio files, and even full episodes of the podcast. And that support on Patreon allows me to keep Carly around. Carly is the fantastic young lady that helps me edit the podcast and maintain the podcast website. We'd like to keep her around, so we appreciate your support on Patreon if you're able to do that. And thank you for being a listener.